Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very special live Q&A session today on managing mental health at Christmas. My name, of course, is Nick. Loads of familiar faces here. I am, of course, the founder and CEO of a company called Coteam. We'll talk a little bit more about them later on. But I'm joined today by a very special guest, Richard. Hello, Richard.
Hey, Nick. How you doing?
Good, thank you. It's very hot where I am right now. I'm in Argentina, so it's a very warm day.
Yeah, last time we spoke, I think you were in Cardiff, and that was less than a few days ago, and now you're in Argentina. So what a change. I'm in a very chilly Leicestershire in the UK at the moment. Morning, folks. For those of you that I've not met, there are some familiar names for me here as well today, Nick. My name's Rich Craddock-Wright, and I am one of the founders at SkillBase First Aid or SkillBase Training. And these days I have a role in course development and authoring our kind of well-being courses. And yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. So, of course, Rich, today we're here to sort of talk about this idea of well, this time of year in particular, often seen through press and through marketing as this, wonderful, joyous occasion. Loads of sort of everything to excess. But maybe for some people, not the happiest or most joyful time of the year. And I thought we'd just kick things off today actually with a little bit of a Mentimeter. I'm just going to invite our audience here to tell us what words you typically associate with this time of year. So if you want to grab your phone out and scan the QR code that's on the screen there, you should be able to access that on your phone. That's going to bring up we're going to generate a little bit of a word cloud, because I'm curious just to get a bit of a feel here with the common words that come to mind. I'll also share a link now in the chat box for those that would prefer to access it through their computer. Brilliant. See lots coming through there. There's the link in the chat as well. Elf on the bloody shelf. Stressful coming through loud and clear. I mean, I can talk a bit for myself around this time of year. I am originally from Australia. I've lived in the UK for the last 8 years. I'm currently residing in Buenos Aires. I haven't been home for Christmas. I haven't spent Christmas with my family for 8 years. It's prohibitively expensive to go back, but it does mean Christmas is somewhat a lonely time for me. It is a time when, particularly in London, where a lot of my British friends go away back to their families, I'm often left by myself, with just one or two friends. So it can be quite a lonely time of year for me. We see loads of other things coming through here. Busy.
Sorry, Nick. I realised that I was smiling and nodding along when you were saying it can be quite a lonely time for me, but it wasn't in response to that. It was that I was reading Family for Good and for Bad, and I was kind of hearing that one and feeling it. So.
Family for good and for bad. Yeah, exactly. Maybe sometimes being away from the family for Christmas is a better thing. Lonely coming through there. Stress is definitely a key one. Family coming through. Red wine also could be seen as a positive, depending on the quantities of the red wine there. But yeah, worriness, busyness, expensive, pressured. I think a lot of people feel like they really need to perform or be a particular way at Christmas time. And I think there's probably a nice sort of place to start the conversation for the day. Rich, do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of some of your learnings and what you've explored at SkillBase?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the thing is, thank you first of all for sharing, folks, those wonderful words that everyone did. And of course, we have the typical words that might first spring to mind, especially if we were a child, maybe for Christmas, and magical and wonderful, the most wonderful time of the year. But actually, when we are adulting, then sometimes it doesn't feel like that. And there are good and bad things about this time of year. And thank you for sharing your story, Nick, there as well. Certainly as a parent, I have great joy around Christmas, but also quite a lot of stress and pressure, because I feel that, same as the person that said Elf on the bloody shelf, I feel this pressure. And last night we were suddenly thinking, oh, where's the elf? And he's got to move and such. So yeah, there are catalysts this time of year for people's well-being to decline. And of course, what we have to remember is that already within the UK, we have quite high levels of mental health already. Quite a few of us here will be familiar with these statistics, but again, just so that we're understanding prevalence, that throughout a kind of general and average year, 1 in 4 people will have a mental health problem. And that happens each year. It's not throughout a lifetime. It's each year. So when we're looking at this last quarter of the year, which can be very stressful for people, we're expecting that prevalence will increase. And just at this time, we know that over the last week, that 1 in 6 people will have experienced a common mental health problem in the last week. We've got loads of participants on today. Thank you everyone for taking time out. And actually, if we think like everyone that's here, that 1 in 6 of us will have experienced a common mental health problem in the last week. And I quite often think about the amount of people I come into contact with this time of year. I was at a school performance yesterday with hundreds of people in the hall, and then I was on the playground, and then I had an event in the village, and I walked around. So I was passing actually probably what racked up for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people by the end of the day. And actually, if I think that 1 in 6 of those people will have experienced a common mental health problem in the last week, then that's really kind of sobering for me. It especially increases as well when we think about the 1 in 3 people with long-term physical health problems. And we'll touch a bit about that today as well, because the 1 in 3 people with long-term physical health problems also have a mental health problem. Which again, for me, if we're thinking of this time of year, and for those of us that might be stuck in a cold or maybe have mobility problems, anything like that we're going to see an increase of that around this time of year as well.
Some pretty astonishing stats there. And it also carries through to our children as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking about kids there, and I was talking to my own children this morning about Christmas and what they're looking forward to and stuff. And there's a lot of pressure on kids this time of year as well. There's pressure for them to have the most wonderful time. There's pressure of knowing what their elf's done, and school performances and all stuff. And even without all of those additional pressures that come in this time of year, 1 in 10 children have a mental health problem that would meet the diagnostic criteria as being a mental illness, which is really quite sobering again. When we're thinking about this time of year, and we're thinking about the extra time we spend with family and people being out of their normal routine as well, and it's really, really something that we have to think about, something that could be prevalent this time of year.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that typically, I've had struggles with my mental health in the past, and it was a dirty word. I think it's become a lot more acceptable to talk about it nowadays, particularly in a professional context as well. But I think it might be useful just to talk for a moment about sort of why some people suffer maybe a little bit more from this than others. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the thing. Some of us here will have experienced mental health problems. Some of us this time of year will be getting triggered, and will know that maybe we're experiencing some more stress and pressure that might tip over to be a mental health problem. Whereas other people, might just seem to be taking this all in their stride and having a breeze and having the most wonderful time of the year as well. So yeah, I'm really keen to explore why some people become ill, particularly this time of year when others don't. And we talk on our courses quite a lot about this idea of people carrying around a pressure pot with them. So we all have this kind of virtual pressure pot, if you like, that is our capacity for dealing with the normal ups and downs, the pressures of life that we all have to deal with. And we all carry that pressure pot slightly differently. Some people carry it kind of in their tummy, some people carry it in their chest. I know that I carry my pressure pot on my shoulders, and I know that because when I'm starting to get stressed, or if I've got a lot of plates spinning, my shoulders do this and start going up towards my ears, because I think I'm trying to hold that pressure pot up. And there's more things flowing in this time of year, as we say: Christmas presents, works, dues, outings, performances, checking in on relatives, spending time with relatives, all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of that stuff that we can see flowing into our pressure pot at any one time.
And pressure's not always negative, though. It can be positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I don't want our conversation to be about is this being, oh, isn't Christmas tough? Isn't Christmas difficult? Isn't Christmas rubbish? You know, I love Christmas. I love this time of year. And yeah, it's the acknowledgement of that. Pressures can be both negative and positive. You know, we know that going on holiday for quite a lot of people might be quite a pressured experience, same as getting married or buying a house. You know, they're all positive outcomes, same as Christmas, but actually the organization of them, the putting together of them, the getting stuff done before the end of the year, the getting ready to maybe not be at work for a couple of weeks, it might make all of us feel more stressed than usual.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, it is about recognizing that this pot exists and where maybe the boundaries are of it, and what you can cope with personally. But of course, when the pot overflows, of course, this becomes what we'd define as overwhelming or inability to cope.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of these things that we add in at this time of year, maybe lack of routine, maybe lack of sleep, maybe lack of a bit of self-care, a bit of overindulgence from time to time, that sort of thing that can all contribute to this pressure pot filling up. And exactly like you say, is having that feeling of overwhelm or not being able to cope and it tipping over to being stress, you know, the physical and mental reaction when we just feel that we can't cope and we start to feel under threat. You know, there's an actual physical threat going on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for providing this context, Rich. I think this is really useful just to understand sort of where this overwhelm or this burnout or this stress can come from. Of course, we're joined today by a lot of people working in professional roles who maybe might be managing teams or specific people in the organization. So we're going to turn the conversation a little bit more around to sort of spotting some of the signs of, you know, maybe someone who is feeling this way and ways in which we can support them. And of course, for everyone who registered for the webinar, we asked you to submit some questions. We have some fantastic questions through on this, which we're going to go through now, but we're also going to give you the option to ask questions live as we go. So if you want, you can scan the QR code at any point that's on the screen. You can click on the link that's in the chat there, and they'll allow you to submit some live questions to Rich and I as well. But let's go through these because I think there's probably quite a lot of color and perspective we can bring to these questions that have been submitted already. So our first question one is quite broad, but what is the most commonly recorded cause for concern over the festive period, but more specifically for employees?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what we need to remember is that all of those stresses and pressures that we talked about there are, you know, if we're managing a team of 10, 20, 30, you know, hundreds of people, that potentially all of those pressure pots could be filling up at one time, kind of simultaneously. You know, it's such an interesting question. This it is difficult to answer, being you know, really honest about it, because there is not much kind of central recording of things at this time of year and illnesses and absenteeism and that sort of stuff. But what we do know is that there's a really tight correlation seen in healthcare settings at Christmas time, but due to the effect of stress. And that's, of course, not just emotional stress. I was reading an article recently about you know, physical stress, and there's actually an increase in heart attacks this time of year. You know, there's quite a huge jump in terms of heart attacks this time of year and over the Christmas period. And why, of course, there's going to be loads of factors that are influencing that. You know, overindulgence, maybe lack of personal routine or self-care, cold weather. You know, it's very much thought that the combination of those kind of extra physical stresses, along with the emotional pressure that people were so kind to share all those wonderful words at the beginning, lead to what they call kind of the Christmas coronary. So you know, stress is in the effects, the broad-reaching effects of stress tends to be what's seen in the healthcare systems this time of year, and that's what naturally we would expect to translate into workplaces as well.
Some pretty sort of cold hard facts there that support why this should be a cause for concern. for employers, and also for looking around your friends and that. It'd also be remiss of us to not talk about, the last few years have been a bit turbulent, right? So of course, the shift to hybrid working or working from home, maybe it's become slightly less obvious when people's pressure pots might be overflowing. This is a great question, I think. So, since this, as an employer, how could you maybe make sure your staff are not suffering? What are the right questions to ask? What are the right sort of signs to look out for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think and certainly that journey's been the same for me. I've worked to move to working from home over the last couple of years as well, and that's a big change. And it is so difficult as teams become more remote and more virtual. But for me, I think the first thing to try and ensure, if you're in a leadership or a HR type role, is to make sure that there is a true parity of esteem between those people that are based in workplaces and those people that are based working from home, to make sure that we're not missing out on those small things that bring that sense of connection that could be missing and lead to suffering this time of year. The small things, they might be Christmas meals, Christmas jumper day, but also those micro kind of details as well. So for me, some of the, what I call the waiting for the kettle to boil chats that you might have if you're based in the workplace. So, oh, how are you? How's the Christmas shopping gone? Oh yeah, it's a bit stressful, isn't it? And those micro connections that people have got. Oh yeah, they're putting a lot of pressure on me at work to get stuff done before the Christmas break, or whatever it is. And it might be that is missing as well. So when people are thinking about virtual workers and hybrid working, make sure that all of those things that we've talked about are brought into virtual meetings, and look for new traditions if you can. Things like, I've seen recently some like virtual advent windows where kind of hybrid workers are kind of taking a day each and decorating kind of behind them and stuff like that, which I quite like the idea of. But and actually there's some of the physical stuff as well. It might seem really, really obvious to say, but we might just not have thought that if we've got workers in the office this time of year, then generally, they're going to be warm. We know that they're going to be cared for. They know that they're going to have kind of the power and heat. But actually, have people thought about their remote workers this year, and especially, with the cost of living crisis, and if they're able to heat their homes, and are they sitting there chilly and shivering at home, and that's not doing their well-being very good. But fundamentally, when it comes down to it, it's all about conversation. So the best way to ensure whether, and make sure that staff aren't suffering is to ask. And it's as simple as that. And actually not just ask once, but ask twice. Make sure that we don't get that automatic response of, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm doing okay. How are you really? Yeah, I'm all right. It's a bit chilly. Let's get, it's a lot on this time of year, isn't that? Yeah, there is. How's that affecting you? And actually making sure that we're having a conversation rather than especially if we're doing online meetings, rather than jumping in, this is the agenda, let's go. Try and recreate those waiting for the kettle to boil moments as much as possible. Can be as simple as asking twice. Yeah,
I laughed a bit because I think of the everything is fine meme that tends to get sent around jokingly, but it's actually many people's reality. And of course, he's freezing to death, he's burning to death in that meme. I love the idea of decorating your background. That's a great little practical tip to take away. Okay, let's flip the conversation the other way. So we've spoken a little bit about what employers can look out for in their employees, but if you're an employee suffering maybe from some poor mental health, or you're having a difficult time, what would be the right way to flag this to your manager? Because I think what we spoke about before is about creating trust in a team, or trust between, with your line managers, where these conversations become much more free-flowing. Maybe some people don't feel like they can speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, this what's important here is that managers are role modeling, that conversation about well-being, but actually the employees also can take a lead in this. And health is everyone's business, and can be the ones that are opening up and having those conversations and saying, so, I was just hoping to have a check-in, or I just want to have a chat, and that sort of stuff. And actually, putting self-care first as much as possible, and not being afraid to answer that question. Sorry, to ask that question, or raise that hand and just say, look, this is tough for me at the moment. But that's so entwined into culture of an organization, isn't it? And I know that's something that, Nick, you guys major in so much, and really that's your area of expertise in terms of culture. I know you've had some personal experience of this sort of stuff from our conversations we've had in the past.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And this is the type of stuff that Coteam has been built out of, is creating the right environment where not only innovation can thrive, but people are not so scared of failure, or people are not so scared of moving away from some of the stigmas perhaps associated with this. And there are, of course, lots of signals to look out for. It can be more difficult when people are working from home. General absenteeism from meetings, or people becoming despondent. I think as we shift into these more hybrid models, where people are going to the office, I know many different companies are experimenting with what the correct approach is. But again, trying to not specifically, you want to create an environment where you're not just looking for signals, but you are openly talking about these things as a team, where the manager is sort of supporting from behind almost. So culturally, it will shift slowly. And I think it's not, there might be specific warning signs that you've spoken about already, Rich, but I think really the goal here, and we've got a lot of people, sitting in HR sort of functions, I can see on the call at the moment, is about trying to promote an environment where this is something that's spoken about openly every day. And that's really ingrained into the company values and into the culture of the organization as well. This is actually an interesting question, probably coming back a little bit more to what you do at SkillBase, Rich. But what would you say? So you offer these mental health first aid programs, so people can become mental health first aiders and train. In your experience working with different organizations, what is your what's your recommended ratio? And maybe for others who are less familiar with the concept, also explain what a mental health first aider is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mental health first aiders come in a couple of different guises. But fundamentally, what they come down to is someone that's able to offer that first assistance and to recognise those alarm bells of someone becoming ill in a workplace and take appropriate action in exactly the same way that a physical first aider might recognise the alarm bells of someone having a heart attack and be able to take appropriate action. It's about that very, very first line, kind of appropriate action to take. One of the real challenges here is, and this is a question we get asked a lot, and people kind of really are after a hard and fast answer. But the truth of the matter is there is no clear guidance in terms of how many people should have. But in terms of our recommendation, what we have to remember is that every employer is responsible for ensuring that people receive appropriate help if they're obviously injured but ill at work. And that's not just about physical first aid. Our vision at skill-based training is that there's absolute parity of esteem between the numbers of people that are trained in physical first aid and well-being first aid, or first aid for mental health, in exactly the same way. But also remembering that there's loads of crossover here too. Stuff like panic attacks, we really have to kind of think, is that a physical first aid challenge, or is it a first aid for mental health challenge? Actually, the answer is it's probably both, and that's why we cover both of those on most of our physical and mental health courses. Because what I think is important here is not to be putting people kind of into boxes of this is how we're going to support people with a physical problem. This is going to how we support people with a mental problem. But actually, we're taking a whole person approach. And actually, this is an employee, this is a team member, this is a colleague needing support in some way, and maybe needing emergency support, which is why we're so passionate about there being that parity of esteem, that those equal numbers of physical first aiders and first aiders for mental health in organisations.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things is it's, prevention is better than cure.
Yeah.
And being proactive is better than being reactive. Often, when someone gets to the state of having a panic attack, then there's a bigger problem at play. Yeah. And I think that this is a question that came in from one of our clients, actually. But how do you empower people to lead conversations around mental health and well-being? I think, again, it comes back to that culture thing. There's a number of different programs that we run that are very reflective, and they get people into a room to talk about the whole person, physicality, mentally, emotions, motivation and spirit and soul, and what drives you, to try and facilitate these conversations, and to try and allow line managers in particular to start leading by example, to show vulnerability, to show empathy, to show care. And I think that is foundations of modern management, in my perspective. I don't know if you have anything else to add here, Rich.
I absolutely great. I mean, to echo everything you say, first of all, Nick, total agreement on all of the above. And I think the thing is for line managers as well is that there is within some organisations that there's this assumption of understanding. I had a meeting with someone recently, someone on this call actually, and they were saying that within their organisation, one of the feedback that comes from line managers an awful lot is that there's all of this: speak to your line manager, go to your line manager, and there's an assumption of understanding that line managers know about mental ill health, and that they know the terms and will know what to do. And actually, many of these line managers aren't trained in a way that gives them good mental health literacy. We get lots of people coming on our fundamental wellbeing first aid courses that are in a management role, or training as fundamental wellbeing first aid instructors with us, so that they can then train their teams directly. And one of the things that we get feedback for is that people feel empowered because they have that understanding, that they have that ability, that confidence to be able to jump in and have that conversation and not worry about saying the wrong thing or advising the wrong thing or suggesting the wrong thing. So for me, it's the first part of empowerment is taking away any assumption of understanding, and really go down to the base level of, right, so what do we know here, and what do we need to upskill ourselves on, so that people know the words, know what we're talking about, know prevalence, know the basics, really.
Yeah, brilliant advice. We've got just a couple more questions left from those that were submitted pre-webinar. But I just want to remind everyone that if there are questions coming up or things that you'd like to ask us, please just scan that QR code that you can see at the top left of the screen there, and you can submit those. And Rich and I will pick those up in about 5 minutes or so. This question that came in was actually quite tough. So there's this sort of tension between like people taking time off for mental health, which is great, but then that also having further impact on the team that remains by maybe increasing their stress and their pressure. How to support that, or how to manage that? Rich, what's your advice?
Oh yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and let's not skirt around that and say that there's a perfect advice, perfect answer for this. It is a tough one. For me personally, the question comes down to equality, parity of esteem. Again, making sure that there's always the same measures in place for someone if they're off with absences, whether that's from a mental health problem or a physical health problem, that there's the same contact with that person, that actually if someone's off with a mental health problem, that they'd still get a get well soon card, but also the same support and the same policy applied yeah, and I know that we've got lots of HR people in the room. That that does include absence policy and absence from work and disciplinary policy in exactly the same way. What we're not suggesting is that there's huge amends made just because things are a mental health problem rather than a physical health problem. But again, what I tend to think about with this is that actually that many of the absences that we might be having could be both. If you've got someone that's taken a lot of time off work for IBS, for example, that could be because of a physical problem or because of a mental health problem, both which trigger IBS. And actually, it could be both things occur at the same time. So yeah. Policies for persistent absence need to be continued, but echoing something that you said earlier, Nick, which was so valuable. This is about being proactive, and that's always going to be preferable. So ideally, my suggestion would be to take the time to curate well-being plans as much as possible for employees, which can be physical and mental well-being plans. We're going to look at the whole person, and that will allow us to bring those plans into everyday conversations, be them return to work interviews or even a disciplinary process for absence. If we have a well-being plan that someone documents for, these are the steps that I might take if my well-being starts to decline, and then that team member isn't taking those steps, then actually what we have there is a really good opportunity for a detailed conversation to say, well, look, we set clear boundaries and expectations. You said that this was part of your commitment of what you were going to do if your well-being started to decline. Have you done that? And if not, can we steer you towards that in the very first instance? So again, I just think that as much as possible, look at the whole person. Take away the boxes of physical or mental health. Look at the whole person, the whole person's wellness, and manage things in identical fashions. But a wellness plan is a great format to open those conversations.
Yeah, of course. And even within that well-being bucket, there's can mean many different things to different people. You talk about physical and mental well-being, of course, emotional well-being, financial well-being.
Yeah, absolutely.
And other, there's a lot of, we saw stress this time of year, cost of living crisis in the UK. It's there's a lot of turbulence in the world, brink of a recession, a war raging in Europe. There's a lot happening. So again, just being attuned to it. This last question that we got submitted, I pondered over this one quite a bit myself, because many, I've for the last decade or so never really worked for another big organization. I run my own businesses. So I worked as a freelance or as a consultant. So I've always been an external collaborator. And sometimes you speak before about HR teams needing to, think about how their absence policy might reflect some of these stresses and some of what's going on. And I think really my take on this is a very simple answer, is that we need to put the human aspect back into it. We're all human, whether you're a collaborator, whether you're a boss, whether it's your partner, whether it's a friend, whether it's a colleague, or whether it's just someone you pass one day in the hallway. I think we all have a responsibility to support one another and to really practice our empathy more than anything else. Empathy, of course, is the ability to see things from someone else's perspective. So I think wherever you sit, you're trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes for the day, can just really maybe help you see things from a different point of view. And Brené Brown has done loads of fantastic work in this space, specifically around vulnerability and empathy as leaders. But I think her words, whether you're a collaborator or not, I think it's sort of irrelevant at the end of the day. You're part of a team and you're a person first and foremost. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but this was a particularly tough question, I think, to
Yeah, again, Nick, as usual, we're quite in line with our thoughts on this, and we take a lot of influence from Brené Brown and talk about Brené Brown on our fundamental well-being courses in terms of empathy and sitting with people. But I absolutely agree that what we're talking here is human to human, and regardless of, like you say, whether that person is our boss or someone that we line manage or someone that we pass in reception at work. You know, in the same way that if we saw anyone that needed support physically, that we, you know, want confidence of being able to jump in and provide that support emotionally, mentally, whatever that might be. And you know, that does all start with a conversation sometimes. That starts with exactly the same way that if we saw someone having, you know, what we might have called a funny turn back in the day, of someone feeling a bit faint and dizzy, and we kind of go, "Are you all right?" We ask the same thing, and if they go, "Yeah, I'm fine," we go, "You sure?" Because to be honest, you don't look fine to me. Oh, it's just a lot on. You know, again, it's human to human, regardless of position. You know, and that's what we want to do. We want people empowered. We want people confident that if they see someone else struggling in any way whatsoever, that they can do that. They can make that approach. That they can say, "How you doing? Everything all right?"
Yeah.
You know, it comes down to that for me.
And of course, I mean, the big difference, I think, between physical health and mental health is physical is a lot more visible often.
Yeah, it can be.
And again, it's a British thing to this sort of stiff upper lip. I know we've got people that are not just from Britain in the course. So to keep calm and carry on, everything's going to be fine, can actually have hugely disastrously negative consequences. So
yeah, I call this, I talk about this on courses as well, and talk about this as the just browsing effect. You know, I can go sofa shopping or TV shopping, and really want to buy a sofa or really want to buy a TV. I walk into the shop, and again, I'm sweeping with a big brush here, but as a British person, you know, someone comes up to me and says, "Do you need any help?" And I go, "No, I'm fine. I'm just browsing. Thank you. I'm fine. Please don't ask me for help. I'm just in here looking around." You know, rather than actually going, "Oh yeah, I'm after a sofa today. You're the expert on sofas. Tell me about sofas." I go, "No," and then actually then have to leap that thing to and show humility to go over to that person and go, "Actually, you know what, that said I didn't need help. Actually, what's the difference between this and this, and what does that mean, and whatever." And you know, so and for that comes down to culture again. When we bring it back, when we pull that back to workplaces, doesn't it? It's that culture to show ourselves and go, "Oh yeah, you know what? No, I'm struggling. Let's talk."
Brilliant. We've got a couple of extra questions that have come through in the session, Rich. So, I mean, we're just going to pull these out live. So we'll see where the conversation goes. You can, of course, if you're watching and still want to submit a question, click the link in the chat, and it should load. But I'm going to have tech issues now. I can see a couple of questions here, so let's just try this quickly. If not, I've got access to them here.
See, this is a perfect example, Nick, almost like it's curated. I can see your pressure pot filling up, even though we're virtual. I can see your shoulders then do this and looking around. Right. So see, I'm seeing the signs already.
I'm going to leave that QR code up and I'm going to read the questions out. So the first question we've got through here is, what would you say are the common mistakes that HR or managers make when addressing workplace mental health? So I think we've spoken a lot about the idea of burying your head in the sand and not addressing it and the negative consequences of that. But have you come across any specific examples that you've seen where maybe HR have stepped in the wrong direction or pushed something that was not right?
For me, the most common thing that I've seen through conversations with people is people assuming or taking a diagnostic approach, and maybe being kind enough to bring their own lived experience in. So maybe that they've got someone that they manage that is experiencing panic or anxiety, and they're trying to find a connection to that person by going, "Oh yeah, I've experienced panic and anxiety. This is what it means to me. This is how it feels to me," rather than taking that curious approach and sitting with empathy. Because what we're trying to do again is take that diagnostic approach. Where does someone fit? What box is it that I'm ticking here? Rather than the curious approach of going, "So what's going on for you? And how does that affect you?" And what are the consequences of that for you? So not trying to pop people into a diagnostic box as much as possible is the advice I would give, because that's what I get told are the common mistakes from conversations I have with people.
Of course. And I think recognizing it's not one size fits all. Just whacking on some yoga classes or putting some bananas in a can not going to solve the issue for everyone. And recognizing that we're all individual there as well. Another question has come through. If you've noticed someone in your team is struggling, how do I approach them? And I know you spoke about asking questions before, Rich. Maybe that's not always the right approach to go in so hard. Any other advice you'd offer around this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that we talk about in the fundamental well-being courses, and we have a model that we call ACT, which then expands actually onto actions. But ACT at the first part is about making an approach. And what we're saying is that it's not always about making a perfect approach. It's not about staging an intervention. It's not about having a big chat. Sometimes it is just about saying, hey, how are you? And that doesn't have to be face to face. It can be in a voice clip. It can be in a message. It can be on an email or a chat. And if someone's not taking that approach and not open to that approach, then we can leave that soft, kind of gentle, open door to them. And actually, for some people, just to reach out and kind words and someone noticing might be enough to encourage someone to be speaking. Difficult with the context of the question because struggling can mean so many different things, and that's why the next part of our ACT, after kind of just opening up conversation, is to be looking for a crisis. And again, we train people on how to deal with a crisis, if necessary. But the key is just talking. It's just having that conversation. It's creating that openness, that culture, not putting too much pressure on someone to talk, not staging an intervention, just saying, hey, how are you? You sure you're okay? All right. Yeah. Well, okay. I'm here if you need me. And that might be enough for that gentle, soft, open door for people. Yeah.
Okay. Great advice there. They were actually the only questions that we had submitted, but I thought before we let people go, it would be worth just sharing a couple of additional things that they can potentially take away.
Yeah, sure.
We've spoken a lot about, I've spoken certainly a lot about this idea of creating a culture where people are able to speak up a little bit more. And of course, that is a key part of sort of what we offer at Coteam. We actually have a one-day program ourselves. We call it Starting with Self. We've developed our own framework, which we call Head, Heart, Body, and Soul, where we took at the different sort of elements of the whole person when it comes to leadership with a small L. And this workshop's designed to get people into small groups, talking about growth mindset, what sort of cognitive ability and learning, their heart, sort of polarity of emotions and their feelings, body, of course, much more around physicality and physical well-being, and then soul, sort of what motivates them. So this is if you think that there's a team that could really benefit from this is something that we run at Coteam, getting people into a room just to start conversations, but also to stop and reflect themselves on what's important. But also at SkillBase, maybe you can talk a little bit about this, Rich, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, obviously we are all about conversations and that first, hey, how you doing? Are you okay? And we want to have those conversations with people, and we offer consultations as well, where we can look at that wellbeing strategy. Maybe people on the call haven't thought about that parity of esteem that we're so passionate about well-being being an overarching, human thing rather than in a physical or mental health box. So we have team members that are consultants in this and experts in this, and we offer consultations that are available, which is a conversation. It's a starting point. It's a non-pressured, right, let's have a look and let's see if there's any quick wins, if there's any tips that we can share with you. We talked about those wellness plans. We have templates there. point people in the right direction of things that they can do. Again, things that people might not have thought about in terms of bringing, return to work interview, wellbeing questions into return to work interviews, or exit interviews, disciplinary grievance interviews, all of that sort of stuff. So loads and loads and loads of good ideas that our team are so keen to share. So have a conversation if anyone needs to. I promise you will find it worthwhile.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rich. I think my key takeaway of this whole session is you can't afford to do nothing. In fact, the impact of that, even just from a business perspective, the cost of that to companies is crucial, but from a human perspective, of course, even greater. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you to everyone that joined us. Hopefully this was a useful session and giving you a few sort of ideas that you can take back into your team. Rich, I look forward to exploring other ways we can support each other in the future as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time as well, Nick. After a particularly hectic week for yourself as well. And I mean, my final takeaway and thoughts as well is that yes, this is a stressful time of year for many, and for those who support many, for those who manage many, whether you're supporting and managing colleagues, or you're supporting or managing family members or friends, and make sure that you are all taking that slice of self-care. And that you're doing something and taking yourself out, whether that's 5 minutes after our conversation today, just go and get a pad and pen and empty your mind, write that to-do list, or just close your eyes and breathe for a few minutes. And some of those wonderful skills that you talked about earlier, Nick, as well. So I think that's my takeaway, and that I thought, I need to go and do a bit of self-care actually today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rich. And last but not least, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah.
Wonderful festive break, however you do celebrate it.
Merry Christmas. Is it Feliz Navidad for you guys there? I would guess.
Navidad. See.
Yeah. Superb. Take care. Lovely to see you.
Bye for now.